everybody. It's great to be here, in a new venue. It's the first time that I give a talk in Maidenhead, and I hope you won't be late for your break, so you'll be glad to hear that. If you are, you can blame me for that. So my talk is based mostly on these questions in the Spirit's book, dealing with good and evil. Basically what I want you to talk about is the fact that although we are all individuals and unique in our individuality, when you look at us as a group, you start seeing similarities. In the same way that when you look at a big family, a large family, you see each person is unique in their own right, but they all look somehow alike, and you can usually spot that they come from the same family, or the same cultural background, or the same ethnicity, or similar ethnicities. First of all, starting, and I want you to draw that parallel between why that is the case, and what we can do with it, to our own advantage and to advantage of our world. So, starting with the definition of good, the moral law. The moral law, as according to the Spiritist doctrine, is the rule for acting. Oh, sorry. Can you hear me better now?
Yes.
Yeah. Moved there. So the moral law is the rule of acting aright for distinguishing between good and evil. It is founded on the observance of the law of God. Humankind acts rightly when we take the good of all as our aim and rule of action, for then we obey the law of God. So the reason why we are both individuals and similar is because we were created by the same thing, by the same, I don't want to call person, entity, the same principle. So we share certain characteristics that we express wherever we are born, whenever we are born. So Jesus said, before, he didn't come to destroy the law, but to fulfill the law. And we are talking here about universal laws because we know that human laws, they change with our understanding of right and wrong. The universal right and wrong has been the same ever since the beginning of whatever, if we want to call it time. Time is also a very linear thing in our minds here on earth. But it will continue to be the same because it's based on immutable principles. Human laws are not. They are based on our understanding. So social psychology is a part of the science, human science, that tries to understand humanity in that sense. Why certain things are universal, why we behave in the way we behave, and also in a kind of way social engineering, not in the negative aspect of social engineering, but in the positive aspect of social engineering, like we do with Spiritism. Spiritism, in a way, social engineering at its highest, because at the moment, there might be something that will come later that's even better, I don't know. But what we know is that it's based on those principles that says, you are what you are now, society is what it is now, but it can be better. So engineering a better society in that respect, not in terms of manipulating people to our own advantage, but actually understanding that when we try to do that, it backfires. So it's better to do things to help each other rather than the other way around. So, I think I've gone a bit far. Yeah. So social psychology tries to understand social thinking, social influences, and relationships. Because to a certain extent, we construct our own reality depending on our interactions with each other, with ourselves, how I feel about myself. I will then express that around me. I will attract others that will be more like me because I feel comfortable with that. So we gather in groups. And so our groups then become our influencers, peer pressure. Everybody understands about peer pressure here, that drive to be similar, that drive to be accepted, that drive to fit in. So we influence each other. That influence goes both ways. And person attitudes and dispositions also shape behavior. Because of that, the law of similarities, we attract what we are. and we are attracted by what we are. And if we understand what we are and what's attracting us and vice versa, then we can choose which way we want to go. Then we can choose to go the right way, the wrong way, try to find a middle way sometimes, to fit in better in a society that's changing. At the moment, for example, our society is changing so fast. Technology is making us more aware of other people in other places. We are facing our own prejudices on a daily basis and having to deal with it. So how does moral laws help us to navigate this ocean of change? So if we think about faith, we always talk about faith in Spiritism and religious spiritual circles as something positive. But we need to be aware that faith can be both positive and negative. When we believe in something good, that I can be good, that I can do better, then I will believe in myself, I will do better naturally, I will interact with people in a more positive way. But if I believe in the negative of life, if I believe that I'm a victim, that everybody is wrong, that society is bad, that there's only bad in the world, we've been talking a lot about that in our group, talking about the transition, the planetary transition that we keep talking about, the world going through. Kardec was already talking about that, and I had a moment not very long ago where I got really fed up with it. I said, well, I don't see anything changing. I got into a very negative place in my head, and I said, I can't see anything changing. It's not changing fast enough for me. Then I had an insight, which probably came from one of my benefactors, saying, well, it's not the world that needs to change around you, darling, it's you that needs to change. And if you don't change, guess what? You come back here. And if you do change, then you can go somewhere nicer. You want to go somewhere nicer, change yourself. So I said, okay, fair enough. I don't care. The world can take as long as it likes to change now. I need to concentrate on changing myself, on behaving myself in a better way. So I went from a negative faith, being nothing's changing, everything is bad, there is only bad in the world, to, okay, I have a sense of responsibility now. If I change myself, then my world around me will change with me, because I will be attracting something that's more positive. So, and that goes towards the confirmation bias, which we tend to look for confirmation of what we believe. So if I believe that the world is against me, I will only my mind will only notice the times that proves me right. But if I believe that the world can be a better place, then I will start noticing the good around me. And in reality, if we did a list every day of positives and negatives that I've come across, the positives would be much longer than the negatives. And the self-serving bias, this is a really good one. I like this one because I can see myself doing that all the time. Everybody in the office is wrong because I'm the only person who is right. That's an extreme example of the self-serving bias. Someone hits a pedestrian and say, "Oh, the pedestrian hit my car and went under," not taking into consideration that, okay, as a driver, maybe I should have gone to the optician 6 months ago, not next year. And we have a tendency of doing that, of seeing things from our perspective, something that justifies the way we behave. So we notice the mote in somebody's eyes, but we don't notice the beam in our eyes. And Jesus said that before. The scientists are very, very late when it comes to things like that. Now, cognitive dissonance. And I've given a similar talk a few years ago about cognitive dissonance, and I concentrated more in terms of when we behave in a way that's different from the way, when we're forced to behave in a way that's different from the way we believe, then we create a psychological conflict that needs to be resolved, because we need to be right, and I can't be right if I'm doing something that disagrees with the way I feel, the way I believe. So cognitive dissonance explains that. But just before I started the talk today, and I know it's coming from somewhere else, I was thinking that happens in a more global, universal way as well. Because when we talk about doing right or wrong, and that drive to improve ourselves is because every time we do something that breaks one of the universal laws of love and kindness and fraternity, we create this cognitive dissonance, spiritually speaking. Our spirits become conflicted because now I'm doing something that I was created not to do, because we were created by the most perfect being in the universe. So to be good is imprinted in our spirits. We're just getting to know it a bit more. So it happens on a smaller scale in terms of human psychology, but also on a universal scale in terms of spiritual psychology. So how do we get there? There are certain norms. We know that it is true because there are certain things that are universal. Everybody will react in more or less the same way, no matter where they live, what language they speak, what ethnicity they come from, what religion they follow. And these are some of the kind of international, universal, unspoken laws of human behavior, the social exchange and social norms. So, first of all, we know instinctively that in the long run, we benefit when we are better to each other. When I was finishing my psychology degree, I did my final experiment, my final project was on something like that. How do people respond if they think that the resources they have, which are limited, needs to be shared with someone else, and they are the ones who make the decision. And some people, very, very few people take all the resources. The majority will split it in half. I can't remember if anyone gave it all up. But I think the majority did at least split it in half. And I came across a paper that was a microbiology paper talking about bacterial behavior. And bacteria, they don't have brains. They don't have nerve system. They are very, very basic entities, basic life forms. And yet, what this paper was describing was that in the colonies, the bacteria that kind of behaved in a more social way to protect the colony did better in the long run than the ones that was kind of selfish. And I'm using these words between inverted commas because, you can't really think the bacteria knew what they were doing. But it's just to illustrate that even at the very earlier stages of life here on Earth, there are certain things that are already present in a very kind of primitive form, but already developing. So we didn't create it. We are part of it. We are at a more advanced stage of that. Now we can understand it. But this is something that has to have come, not by random chance in evolution, but it comes from the source that creates everything. The reciprocity norm as well is the universal law that explains that there is a certain expectation that if someone helps me, I'm not going to harm that person. Again, these are global definitions, okay? This is not to say, because our minds are still so primed to think, yeah, but so-and-so did not do that. I know, we all know a so-and-so that didn't do that. But when you look at general global behavior, this is what often happens. If a country sends aid to another country that has, experienced an earthquake, we don't expect that country to get its act together and go and bomb the country that aided you. Because there is that expectation. If you're good to me, I ought to be good to you as well. I ought to be at least neutral and not cause you harm. And social responsibility norm is that an expectation that those needing help, whether they can help me or not, whether they can pay me or not, I have a moral duty to support. So, it's the business of, society is known by the way it treats its most vulnerable members. And altruism can be taught. We know that, because we study as adults. We study the need to be better, the need to improve ourselves. And each one of us here, when we look back at how we used to think, how we used to behave, if we have been involved with an activity, either by a spiritist group or a social group, that kind of encourages us to look at ourselves critically and identify the areas that we still need to improve, we will find that we are probably better now than we were before. We have a better understanding, at least, of the areas that we need some work on. When I lose my temper, I know more when that's likely to happen, so I can start avoiding losing my temper by learning to communicate my needs and difficulties with others around me sooner, so I don't lose my temper. So we become more self-aware. And remember that social influences shape our behavior, but we can also influence the societies, the people around us. Am I still okay with time? Yeah, I'm nearly there. So, what if we really make an effort to do unto others as we would like them do unto us? The first thing we need to bear in mind here is that there are more similarities between us as humanity than differences. Today, we are living the day after another incident in London. I was in London Bridge yesterday, just a couple of hours before that incident took place. And and I remember I was there and just walking around the station. And there were lots of information coming through because I was remembering so vividly the incident before. And it was only when I got home to my cousins that said, because I had been out all day long and I didn't see any of the news, so I was completely unaware of what was happening. And then when something like that happens, there is a natural tendency, and it is very natural, because we need, the instinct of self-preservation is the strongest that exists. So we naturally go into, how do I protect myself from these bad people? We need to remember that these bad people, we are more similar to them, to each other, than we think we are. But to change that, to be able to protect ourselves and our societies and our children, then we need to really work on this one here. Because we change the world around us. It's not the world that changes around us. And this is what I got when I was getting very, very, very annoyed with certain politicians, because in my head it became very personal. And if they were there, I cannot guarantee that I wouldn't have been one of those bad people that would refrain from slapping them very hard. So, that illustrates to me at that time that I had a lot still to work on that. Because it is so very easy to forget that we are actually the same family. It's like brothers and sisters fighting each other out, and then growing up and thinking, remember when we used to fight each other and beat each other up? Yes, and now we love each other because we grew out of that. So certain universal laws, they are imprinted in our psychic, in our spirit, and if we learn to understand them a tiny little bit better, it becomes easier to start doing that, doing unto others. And we start small. I always tell my clients, start very small, because if you aim very high and then you don't succeed, it's like, I want to cross to the other side of the river, but I only have 2 stones for my bridge. I don't have a bridge yet. But if I go back and look for more stones, eventually I will build a bridge towards the other side, and then I can cross. So when we look at something like that, and then we look at ourselves, it's like, oh my God, I'm so far from that, I'm never going to do it. But if we start small with the little things of the everyday, like I was walking, and I was late for work, and there was someone walking a bit slow in front of me, and I was getting really annoyed with that person. And then I realized, she doesn't have eyes at the back of her head, she doesn't know I'm late for work, why am I getting annoyed with the person walking in front of me? So little things like that can help us to build that bridge to the other side, where we become more like that, doing unto others as we want like them. And we are there as well, okay? Us, there. We need to be kind to ourselves too. So we can't forget that. Otherwise we can't be kind to others. So I think I'm on time. Okay. Thank you.